of the League of Nations in the 1930s, then lastly look at the weaknesses of the League of Nations. So under the failures of the League of Nations of 1930s, we are going to look at the Manchurian crisis of 1931 to 33, then look at the disarmament conference of 1932 to 34, and then look at the Abyssinian crisis of 1935 to 36. The Manchurian crisis of 1931 to 33. Japan invaded Manchuria in northeast of China after a long delay and no action was taken. The League tried to condemn Japan's action, then Japan simply gave up its membership with the League of Nations. Japan decided to no longer be a member of the League of Nations, and for that reason, they did not have to listen to what the League of Nations was telling them not to invade Manchuria. And then the use of sanctions for for Japan to leave Manchuria was not even mentioned or done. None of this was done because, mind you, the League of Nations did not have its own armed forces at the time. So the League tried to order the Japan troops to stop the attack, but they continued and brought Manchuria under their rule. And after the 1930, there were more examples of powerful nations ignoring the League of Nations. So no powerful nation listened to the League of Nations. They continued ignoring because they knew that the League of Nations did not have it in their power to stop them as it lacked an army of its own. The biggest problem was fear. No country wanted to take the risk in disarming first. Every country believed that if they were going to disarm, they should all do it at once. And they did not want to take the risk of doing it first because this meant that it would leave the country very vulnerable to any possible attack from countries that refused to disarm. Countries did not believe in collective security. They did not trust and believe in collective security because countries were part of the League of Nations, so there was little they could do for collective security. Moving on to the next point, Germany complained that only it had been forced to disarm. So Germany did not understand why should it only be the country that should disarm if the League of Nations was preaching collective security. So Germany believed that if they were to disarm, they should all disarm. The League of Nations could not agree to disarm and refused to allow Germany to rearm. So League of Nations itself did not want to disarm, but yet at the same point wanted Germany not to rearm. So Germany did not understand this. So Germany in the end left the League of Nations and began to rearm openly. And then League members also began to increase their armed forces. So this was also a problem because the League failed to agree on what armaments were and on how they should be conducted. So Allied powers never disarmed. When the Treaty of Versailles forced Germany to disarm, the idea was that eventually the Allied powers would disarm, but this never happened, and Adolf Hitler used this point as a reason to rearm itself. Adolf Hitler was the president of Germany at the time, so they used this point that the Allied powers did not want to disarm. They used this point to rearm itself because they did not understand why did they of 1935 to 36. Italy invaded Abyssinia, known as Ethiopia today. The League members could not agree on effective sanctions against Italy. They could not agree because they did not have any army of its own and only had smaller countries as supporters, so there was little that they could do to stop this. And then Britain and France tried to do a secret deal to give most of Abyssinia to Italy. So this was very disappointing to most countries and meant that the League had less influence and countries were not even interested anymore at this point, because Britain and France, these were the two biggest countries of the League of Nations, and yet they wanted to do a secret deal to give most of Abyssinia to Italy. And then the League of Nations was seen as a powerless and irrelevant irrelevant. Moving on to the So, when the League was started, three of the world's major powers were not members. These three major powers were not part. The United States refused to join because it was not interested in keeping itself involved in countries' world quarrels. The communist country, which is Russia, and the defeated nation, which is Germany, did not join. This reduced the influence of the League of Nations because of the absence of the three major power countries. And then the League had no armed forces of its own to ensure decisions, and it could not make countries provide its soldiers, like the small countries that were part of the League of Nations. The League could not request these countries to provide soldiers, and the League did nothing and was seen as a watchdog with no teeth. What security were they providing if it did not have any army of its own? And then moving on to the next points, the absence of the United States and Russia and Germany meant that Britain and France were its two strongest members. Both these two countries were weakened by the First World War I, and either of them were prepared to risk or to give up their military forces to be used to keep world peace.